shut up. Welcome, we are TableGoth, a group of tabletop gaming enthusiasts and Gothic aficionados, and we are here to review Fall of London. I was the storyteller for this chronicle. My name is Bully.
And I'm Mandy Morose. I got to play a character. I don't want to spoil anything, though.
She did great, I did great, and we're going to talk about it. It being this book more than our story. We have another video for that. We're going to do a quick, spoiler-free review, basically covering what the book is, what's in it, and if you should get it, and what to expect, and share some of our personal first-hand insights to this still in the package fresh book. We played using the early release PDF, and from what I understand, it's more or less the same thing that's what's in this, for better or for worse. So, let's jump right in. This is the first chronicle book for Vampire the Masquerade 5th edition, meaning this is not a source book. This is a book that has a story in it that's intended for you to play. It can work, for sure, if you want to do a setting in London, but it's not intended for that. So if you're looking for something that gives you a ton of information so you can throw any of your characters in London, this isn't what you're looking for, because this is a very specific time in London where everything's going really badly. Or, well, depending on what side you're on, I guess. But yeah, this is a storybook first and foremost. I would also say this chronicle serves best as its own thing. I wouldn't necessarily throw a group of existing characters into this or think you could start with this and then continue playing after. That could work out a little better, but this is definitely more of a starting point than like bring your favorite characters into this chronicle and see what happens. It's, I think, works best as its own thing. The book contains 6 chapters. Each chapter was roughly a 3-hour session for us. But we're also very focused, very driven, very good at that sort of thing.
We talk a lot, I think, is part of it.
We talk a lot. I mean, I think that's good, though. We got 9 3-hour sessions out of this chronicle. Following it, I tried to really stay faithful to it as far as what's in it, not adding a lot, not taking away a lot. So, again, works as like a nice, contained chronicle for you guys. Like I said before, it's story, not a lot of mechanical things in there. You're not going to find new clans. There's some new disciplines, but they're really intended just for the NPCs. Nothing really new power-wise or anything like that. There's lots of information on London, but like I said, this play takes place at a very specific time. But in 2012, before Mithras came back, before the Second Inquisition was really huge. This is the beginning of all these things. So, like I said, it could work for an interesting source book. You can pull ideas out of it, but it's not going to give you everything you need to run London in any time setting. Also get a lot of stat blocks in here, like full write-ups for a lot of elders, Mithras, some interesting characters like that. So if you're looking for interesting NPCs that are already fleshed out, not only with their information, but their actual character sheets, there's plenty of that in there. That's probably the most crunchy mechanical bit of it. And there's lore sheets. There's just a handful of them, and they're really intended more for this chronicle. We ended up not really using them.
Not too much.
You could get away with them. Some of them you could bring into other chronicles. There's some that have to do with like Second Inquisition or being tied to a Justicar. Obviously, those can apply to any city. We're going to talk about the accessibility of this book, the layout of the book. Personally, I think it's a really good starter one for new players. How do you feel? You're not exactly brand new. You've played a little bit, but you're definitely new to the lore,
Yeah,
I would say.
I think it introduced lore well. You don't have to know anything about Kindred lore. You don't have to know anything about mechanics of it. Like there's no, like you said, no crunchy stuff. So you can go in pretty new and learn it as you go.
This obviously deals with Mithras, who's this huge figure in like the lore and the canon. It all revolves around him. I'm sure going in you had no idea he was even a vampire in this setting. Do you feel like that like hurt, or was it fine sort of not knowing about that and playing a character whose main mission is to bring Mithras back?
Yeah, if you follow the way they have it set up, like if you play what they have in there for you, characters and things like that, I think not knowing about Mithras was really helpful to me to play the character the way I did. I enjoyed the way I played it. And so not knowing about that didn't really affect me, and I thought it added to the story that they were introducing. And now I know more about vampire lore and
Mithras
like in the larger universe. So
yeah, I think it's a cool, like, it definitely introduces it to you, especially the chapters are laid out in themes. So if you're new to the game, there's one of the themes is like on feeding and hunger, one's about bargaining. So
Yeah.
you'll get a lot of the like main staples of vampire society that's sort of laid out nicely. So not only do you learn about like the lore in general, but also some of the specific like Mithras lore, Second Inquisition lore. Layout wise, for like the storyteller, layout's fine. Like I said, it's like all these books, it's hard if you're trying to reference a lot of things. But luckily, this is mostly for like a linear story. So as long as you use it that way, it gets kind of tricky looking up things here or there. But learning a chapter and sticking to a chapter, you'll be fine.
would you say that this book is also good for newer storytellers in Vampire because of the way it's set up?
I think so. I think it's definitely a big thing is because the mission it's a focused story without getting into really any spoilers. You have a very clear cut mission you have to do, so it's nice as a storyteller. You don't have to necessarily keep track of all the players' individual backgrounds and sandbox stuff, which Vampire is traditionally a kind of sandboxy game that really is the player drives it more. Not to saying that isn't an option. If your players want to do that, you could definitely, this gives you the tools to do so, but it's nice having like a clear-cut agenda and then being able to like absorb a chapter at a time as a storyteller and focus on that. The part that's probably the best organized is actually like the player character section. Not for the players, but for the storyteller. It gives you again, not really getting into spoilers, but essentially the basis is you're playing characters who are in torpor, they don't have their memories. So it gives you a really cool section of all these different flashbacks you could potentially give them. It gives you their real background and like they're fully, so you understand who these characters are even if the players don't. So it's sort of neat sitting back and seeing like how the players play it, knowing how accurate or not it is to them. And it doesn't actually matter once you get into the story, so you can't really play them wrong even though they're pre-generated characters because they don't have memories and the players get to make their own personalities a little bit. The one part storyteller-wise, I think the best thing to do is definitely learn the memoriams. The more you know the flashbacks, the easier it is to organically pepper them in the story. And so instead of thinking like, oh man, that really relates to Catherine's memory from this, the more you know those memories, the easier it is to just lean into them instead of prepare for them. Although you can definitely.
And also as a player, it's just really neat when it just kind of happens. So if it feels more organic, then I think the player really gets involved with like their character and how they remember things, and it becomes an experience for them.
I think it's a cool sort of like were you playing, did you feel like if you did something that triggered memoriam, like, okay, so like I did something right, or I did something that's actually, I'm starting to get a feel for the character because my actions are triggering these memories.
Yeah.
That's sort of the idea I was going for, at least. Also, accessibility-wise, like I said, the lore doesn't matter if your players don't really understand it. Use a storyteller, it gives a really good write-up on Mithras, the background, all sort of the moving pieces. So it's not that hard to consume. I wasn't super familiar with this particular setting and lore, and I picked it up pretty easily. I'm also pretty smart, but it wasn't that hard. And then a lot of people ask about the artwork. This goes away from the core books a little bit. There are some like models and some pictures, but actually is more of like actual drawn artwork in this than anything. Usually the actual photographs are more like mood pieces than actual like character depictions. So yeah, it's laid out in a very aesthetically pleasing way, I would say. I think they're starting to get their feel for a mix of the both in the way that some of the old fans like the actual art. And I think some of the stuff they did, the photography was cool too. Yeah. So they have more of a mixture of it in this. Storyteller-wise, like I said, as long as you take it chapter by chapter, it's not too hard preparing for. And especially with Vampire, it's not necessarily creating like stats or encounters. It's more or less learning the motivations of the characters that the player is going to be interacting with. So to me, that's always a little actually harder because it's not a character I made, so I have to learn this character and understand them. But like I said, they do really good NPC write-ups, so that it really made it easy to jump in, get a feel for them, and play them out as needed. And then, as far as the player goes, there are 5 pre-generated characters, and I personally, especially running it, think it's a good idea to play the pre-gens. I would rate this much higher with the pre-gens. I think without doing it, you're losing a lot. How did you feel having to play a pre-generated character? Because I didn't give him a choice.
Yeah, I wasn't super stoked about it at first, only because I felt limited, but because the characters are really well made. They have really neat abilities, so if you're worried about not being able to do anything cool, you don't have to worry about that. And they all have really complex backgrounds and motivations, and not all are equal in any of those things. So I thought that made for a really diverse group. I felt like they put a lot of effort into having diverse characters and diverse backgrounds, and I really appreciated that. And yeah, it turned out far better than I thought it would be. I really liked the character I played and got to develop her, and I felt like I got to stick true to some of like the original things I got from her, and that was really neat, getting to meld like my own ideas into a character that was already made. It gave me a lot of like support in making those decisions, which I thought was fun.
Yeah, essentially, there's no wrong way to play the pre-gens. They're playing vampires who've been torpors for 70 years. They were put in torpor in 1940. They wake up in 2012. They don't really have their memories. So there's not like, even though it's a pre-generated character, there's certain things you have to, like, you see their stats, you see what you're good at, so you sort of kind of build in your mind, okay, this person's good at this and this, and maybe their personality is reflected in these ways. And like I said, even though you slowly get flashbacks, that's what I really like about this, is there's not really a wrong way to play them. Even if you as a storyteller see it's like, oh, they're way off of like how it's written, the story sort of has a way of making sense of that, which is really cool, especially at the end. And like you said, it's a pretty neat representation of, so the clans is Bruja, Tremere, Ventru, there's a Hakata, and who am I missing? Nosferatu. And like I said, all like, there's a bunch of races, different gender identities, sexualities, a lot of different things are represented, which is neat to sort of find out as you go.
Yeah.
And there's sort of, I know there's plenty of gatekeepers and those types who get prickly about things like that with the social justice or whatever, but it's presented in a really way that's both sensitive to it and also it's not really ramming it down anywhere. So it's just very matter of fact, and you just roll with it however way you want to roll with it.
Yeah. It's not about making a statement by like using those things. That's what I felt about it. It wasn't like trying to like push anything on you. And obviously you can choose in your character if you're not comfortable with something. Like that's always an option. But I think it just created people, and everyone's a little bit different. So I really liked that.
Yeah, so I highly recommend doing your session 0 so people understand why you want to do pre-gens and then using the pre-gens. If not, at least if they're making new characters, I would stick to the same memory loss thing and the same that they're Heralds of Mithras thing. Yeah,
I don't know where you would even go.
If you just bring in a coterie and they get this same mission, it just won't feel as personal or important to them. And it's just, like I said, I think it would really take a lot out of how the story's written.
For sure. I mean, you can always, try it, and if you don't like it, move on with the storyline or something somehow. But I think you lose a lot if you don't. Like, there's a reason it opens this way, and I think you lose a lot if you don't use those characters.
And even with the stats, honestly, I think you're okay to, if people really want to adjust some of the stats, that's fine. Although I think there's something fun about like being given stats and like, okay, let's figure out who this character is. But I mean, if people are really sticklers about that, the stats at the end wouldn't matter that much.
No.
But like I said, I would give the pre-gen a try instead of you might have the initial reaction of not to. And then just, like I said, we're trying to keep it spoiler free, but how did you feel about the story overall? just in its entertainment value, being involved in it? Did it feel like World of Darkness-y to you or interesting?
It did, and especially because everyone's played different types of storylines before. So this one was so different from what I'd experienced and watched other people play. So I thought the story was really neat. I liked the timing it was set in, and like being an older kindred was really cool. And it just gave me some different avenues that it taught me a different way of playing, which I think is really important. You play different styles of gaming. So this taught me a different way to use a character, to use abilities that maybe I had in other characters, but never really understand the full potential of them.
Yeah.
And going back to kind of the having a pre-generated character, there's less of an emotional tie I really found, which is not bad in this situation because you take chances and like maybe you play a little more aggressively, like you use powers a little bit more. And I think it gave you a little bit of freedom to just try to be this character with no consequences, really.
Yeah, I think that's also why this works so well as a contained story. Because, like I said, you might you'll take risks you wouldn't normally take, and like I said, you can get into some personal things. You can't really explore some of these characters' backgrounds, but this wouldn't really be the chronicle for that.
Yeah.
As much as getting to figure out what these kindred can do and what part they're going to play. Story-wise, I would also, like I said, the 6 chapters, I would recommend playing them in order if you can. It worked out organically for us, where I kind of led them down that path, and I didn't have to like force them one way or another. But it's definitely, I think the pacing was pretty well done and whatnot, especially when it comes to like some of the more stressful action chapters and some of the more social chapters. So technically, you could get through the whole book without fighting anyone in true vampire fashion, but it's got a little bit of everything. I think the way it's laid out is definitely probably the best way. Essentially, though, I mean, the basics, it's a fetch quest. Like I said, not to spoil anything, we're collecting things, which I said on the surface, again, doesn't seem like a fun sell, but that's why I think the pre-gens really elevate that to where there's not necessarily the story, the missions itself are fascinating, your objectives aren't necessarily fascinating, but figuring out who you are really elevates everything.
Yeah, and you're connected to so many things from your past that maybe you don't realize or you're choosing not to be a part of. So that just adds a whole lot of drama in there. And you have to figure out new ways to interact with people you may have had interactions with before. So that's really cool.
Fun. Also, a big part of the story, like I said, it's revolved around these kindred and torpor trying to bring Mithras back, or not, depending on what they decide to do as the story progresses and they find out more about who they are. Then this is obviously Fall of London. This is the Second Inquisition. This is when they first really became a threat. There are some really fleshed out Second Inquisition NPCs in here, but this book mostly treats them like this building existential threat, something that's always happening in the background. You do obviously deal with them directly. You do see firsthand that they're a threat, but then they're always just this thing that's getting like just closing in on you. So I think it does a good job with that, rather than make it to where you're just fighting guys with guns the whole time.
Choosing between 2 quests almost.
Yeah.
They're just kind of waiting there, and if you choose to engage or interact, and that's like where your characters want to take it, I think that's an awesome option because it is really exciting, and I think I learned a lot more about the Second Inquisition in general. But it was nice to not have to juggle those constantly. They just kind of peeped in at good moments. So
yeah, they actually have mechanic in this. They have threat levels that you can kind of actually use if you want kind of an actual chart to use on how to play the Inquisition and what sort of presence they should have in your game, depending on the player's actions. Like I said, there's a ton of NPCs in here, most of them unnecessarily fleshed out, although some of them they're just sort of worked out oddly for us, where our NPCs that got the most spotlight were the ones least fleshed out in it. Because like I said, they have like potential background allies and enemies and stuff, and it just happened that you guys really interacted with some of the ones that weren't really a huge part of the book, but you guys made part of the book. But that's like any role-playing game. You never know the NPCs that your players are really going to attach to and make you play constantly. But there's a ton of options in there for them. I've read around, and there's some issues with the book, too. Stuff that you probably didn't really notice. But just, it's mostly sort of mechanical error stuff. There's some typos, which they even talk about like blood points apparently at one time, which is from an old system. Some of the pre-gens you'll have to, you guys, which I didn't even catch, you should have like specialties in certain things, like academic science and stuff like that. It's just, they're easy fixes, everything I saw. The biggest thing I would say, it's not really a mistake, but something I would do is if one of your people's playing the Hakata character, there's a bit of a mistake with their discipline, and Cults of Blood Gods is out, I would definitely use that to supplement. Otherwise, there's not a lot of Oblivion powers for them to use. Luckily, I got the PDF for Cults of Blood Gods, so we were able to have that list of powers. And obviously, the Hakata is something new and exciting. What a lot of people,
so cool.
What a lot of people want to mess with.
Yeah.
So if you're looking for a ton of Hakata stuff, yes, one of the pre-gens is a Hakata, but there's not a lot of Hakata stuff without Cults of Blood Gods. Like I said, there are new powers, but people who are the type, they're like, oh, the power's in the book, that means my player should, or my character should get to learn it. They're not really balanced that way. They're just intended for story stuff for certain NPCs to have. So if you're the type that's a stickler about that, then you might have an issue with the imbalance of powers, but just keep them as NPC powers. And also, it's not even like I described you, okay, they're using this discipline now.
No, which was really cool because, again, you don't know a lot of things, and so you're playing against, other kindreds or, whatever, and you don't know what they're doing, you just know what it's doing to you, and that's really neat, that mystery, because it's not like you're shouting out your ability every time you use it. Like, that would be ridiculous. It's just cool to see whatever they're doing, it's doing this, and that's fun.
Yeah, as long as you're not too worried about the crunch of it, or you don't have the players who are like demanding to know what, you'll be fine. So all in all, some minor, it's really just like layout error stuff, but someone who just ran it, I would definitely recommend it. Like I said, especially as like it's actually, I didn't even think it would be sort of intended for new people, but I think it really, like I said, all of the players were, we had started a campaign. We kind of did this in the middle of our other campaign. Like, so it's just really cool seeing another side of it. Another big recommendation I'd have with this book is a little something, if you watch ours that might seem odd, is I gave them a ton of XP.
It was the best.
A little behind the scenes. Because they're supposed to be these powerful, important things. I like the idea is that you're learning who you are, you're rapidly getting stronger, remembering the things you can do. So I definitely cranked up the XP. And there's so many elders and things. It's easy to get involved in the stories of players and put things in motion, but watch them happen and not really be able to participate because there's so many powerful NPCs in this. So I liked eventually getting to where you can actually interact and make a difference.
Right.
But overall, really like the story. The book itself, like I said, for a storyteller, the layout was fairly easy to use as far as keeping things on track, as long as you take it a chapter at a time. But like I said, definitely would recommend it as a standalone chronicle more than anything. What are your overall thoughts?
I really enjoyed it. Like I said, there were a lot of things that gave me more confidence as a player. I learned so much about the lore without having to just, sit and read a wiki all day. And it's a really cool experience. I would definitely recommend it.
All right. You got 2 recommends because scores don't matter. It's more about like knowing what the product intends to do and does it accomplish what it tries to do. So this book, can I see it again? Sure. What it intends to do is provide an entertaining, cool, contained story, I think. Like I said, I would use the pre-gens. I think not using the pre-gens, it's going to be a lot less enjoyable, I think, honestly.
Yeah, if you change anything, I would not change that.
Yeah.
Add to whatever you want or take away or whatever, but the characters they give you make the story.
Yeah, the idea of the memoriams, the memory loss, all that. Keep that. So don't listen to anyone who tells you not to do that. But if you do that, it's a great book. Otherwise, that's us. And those were our thoughts on Fall of London. Bye.